Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Advancing Our Church. My name is Jim Friend. So glad to have you all with us today. We have some very special guests, and we're going to talk about Christian leadership and the need for it today in our church. And we have with us today Christopher Perea and Aaron Manin, who are the authors of a new book. And the new book is Catholic Leadership for Civil Society. And we're going to go into that a little bit. And really, I really enjoyed this book because it offered just a great snapshot of all the resources that are out there in the church that really define the role of the laity. So we'll talk about what is the role of the laity of the church, a little bit about, we'll talk certainly about the book and, kind of what Aaron and Christopher are kind of calling us to do in the way we see leadership or they see leadership today. So first, let me provide a little bit of an introduction. I'm going to start with you, Aaron. Aaron is a development officer for the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. She's a small business owner. She's a speaker, a writer, an influencer, and she is a part of the Catholic Leadership for Civil Society, which is, of course, our book today, and she's the co-author of it. So welcome, Aaron. So glad to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
And Christopher Perea is the author also of this book, and he is the CEO of the Tepeyac Leadership. He is, prior to that, he was the director of Hispanic Ministry, Hispanic Mission Office in the Diocese of Phoenix, where is my hometown, of course. We were just talking about that before we started recording. And he was also, Christopher, I noticed you were also a television news reporter for Univision. So welcome, Christopher. So glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be here.
Christopher, tell us a little bit about the Tepeyac leadership a little bit, and just tell us how did it get started and how long have you been with the group?
Absolutely, Jim. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. So about now, I'm trying to keep up because now I think it's about going into the 7th year when we conceptualized the idea for TLI. I was working still for Bishop Olmsted for the Diocese of Phoenix, and as an employee of the diocese, I was sent to a secular civic leadership development program as a representative of the diocese. I went through a program like that, from which later we took the template, only the template for TLI. But back then my eyes were open to the reality of civic leadership development in the United States. It's a very, it's a concept that really is all over the United States. It has been around since the 70s. These programs take on names like Leadership Philadelphia, Leadership Los Angeles. They're in all the major cities and even some small cities. 7 years ago, Bishop Olmsted and I looked at this and thought, gosh, this is a noble idea, forming leaders. Unfortunately, we also realized that many of these programs are forming leaders with values that run counter to Catholic teaching. So we set out to create the first, and as far as we know, the only civic leadership development program for Catholic professionals in the United States. And that's how Tepeyac Leadership started.
Excellent, excellent. And how I took a look at the website, and you have a lot of really impressive folks who are a part of the organization. It looks like it's really caught fire. And are you getting national exposure now with your mission?
Even international exposure.
Wow.
At this point in our organization, we are thinking globally now. We're thinking in global terms, because for the past 2 years, we've been having participants from outside the United States, Canada, Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe. So we're beginning to recruit even mentors and speakers from other countries outside the United States. And we realize that the mission that God has put in place in front of us really is the mission to form leaders and create, build a network of a global network of Catholic leaders, lay Catholic leaders for society.
Incredible. And tell us a little bit about the work that they do. How does somebody get involved with the group?
Absolutely. So this is TLI is a 5-month program, 18 weeks. So for somebody to participate, and it's open to all Catholic professionals, we say in the early to mid stages of their career, from any walk of life or specialty. And they have to apply for admission. There's an admissions process. October and November is when we take applications. People go submit their application online from our website, and they go through an interview. And it's the last week of January when we send the communications to successful and unsuccessful candidates Then the program runs from February to June. The participants commit to joining one night a week for 18 weeks or 5 months. So we have 18 sessions. And every night for 3 hours, participants engage these sessions that really exposes them to different areas of human activity or secular life. And we explore issues of concern, concrete issues of concern from the lens of the church, from the Catholic lens, in the areas of, for example, education, healthcare, business, government, news media. And we talk about the concrete ways in which the laity can fill the gaps, fill the needs in their communities, and lead in their own communities.
Excellent. Well, and that really dovetails so well into your book, because I'm sure that many of the things that you discuss in that program can be found or in the book, and the book can be found in your program, but by kind of vice versa. Yeah. Tell me, Aaron and Christopher, what led you to write this book? I'm curious. How did you, first of all, let me ask, how did you two wind up working together?
I can start. Christopher can finish. I am a graduate of the Tepeyac Leadership Initiative program. I graduated from the program in 2019. So I was very familiar with the process and the topics and the goal and mission of the program. And I'm so grateful that I went through it, because it really taught me a lot that I didn't know I needed to know about being a Catholic leader in civil society. So that's how I met Christopher. He was leading our sessions in Phoenix at the time in person. And after I graduated from the program, I spent some time helping TLI with their Instagram media account and their blog. So I was managing those two things for about 6 months each, and I love to write. And so I was not only managing the blog, but writing some of the pieces for it as well. And I didn't know this, but Christopher had already started the project of this book on his own, and invited me onto it at the end of 2020. So I happily accepted. I was very honored. I was very honored to be invited into this, because I'd always been in the back of my mind, oh, it'd be cool to write a book someday, but I don't know what I'd write about or what I would do. And it was just very clear that the Lord was placing this opportunity in front of me to accept and say yes to. And it's been an amazing experience and an amazing project. So Christopher, if you want to chime in for how and why you started it.
Yeah.
Sure. So thank you, Erin. So I think Erin was God sent, because if she hadn't come by, maybe I would still thinking about writing. I would still be thinking about writing a book. And in reality, not only did she took on so much work so that we could together finish this project, but she really contributed some very important components of the book that I had not thought of. So we do feel, Erin and I, that the whole process was inspired by the Holy Spirit. I sincerely believe that. This is a book that has a simple message. It's not high in the sky theology, but it's an important message. It's an urgent message. It's a timely message. And we feel that honored, really. I feel honored that God chose us to put this together, because the book is being very well received. And the feedback and the reviews that we've heard, people are finding value in the message of the book. And what is the message? It's an invitation for lay Catholics, particularly professionals, that's our audience, to reconsider which is the best way to help advance the mission of the church. And we are suggesting that it's not to spend all day at the parish, signing up for every single ministry or apostolate that we're invited to join. True, we should be involved in our parish community, and we should be supportive of our pastors, but our true vocation as laity, and if God has blessed us with a professional career, is because that should be our field of mission. And that's what the book explores, and our program as well.
Excellent. You know, in the first chapter, it's interesting, you speak about the sex abuse scandal, and you encourage Catholics not to leave, but to lead, to do just the opposite. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You know, Jim, I've noticed now that I've been in the leadership space for so long, for some time. I noticed that sometimes it's difficult for Catholics to think of themselves as leaders, particularly lay Catholics, right? The clergy, our bishops and the Pope, they think of themselves as leaders. They are leaders.
Sure.
But laity, we know that we're supposed to be followers of Jesus Christ. So we see ourselves as followers, not immediately as leaders, right? But I now I'm tending to turn that around and tell people, listen, because we are followers of Christ, we're supposed to lead others to Christ. So by virtue of our baptism, we're all supposed to be leaders. We're supposed to be leading others to Christ, right? So I think that is the invitation. And where we found ourselves, as you very well know, in your neck of the woods, Jim, when the most recent series of scandals, sex abuse scandals in the church, hit the church, many were discouraged. And unfortunately, many did walk away from the faith. Yeah. And that should never be the reaction of a Catholic, that should understand that the church is both human and divine. Divine because it was founded by Christ, but human because it's made out of human beings, right? And I tell people, if from the very 12 that were chosen from the hand of our Lord Jesus Christ, from his own disciples, one was able to betray them, another one was able to deny him 3 times, and yet the third one doubted that he had resurrected until he put his hands and fingers into the wounds of Christ. Why should we be surprised that along the years, throughout the history of the church, there will be some bad characters, bad apples, and they will probably always be around until Christ comes back. But that's not an excuse to leave the faith. And moreover, the laity, we believe, should now take on the responsibility of leading, because we have sort of just retrieved from the leadership space in the church and let all of that responsibility on the shoulders of the clergy. And it was never intended to be so. So in the book, we go back to the Second Vatican Council and we point out to the readers that this is really our duty. This is what Mother Church has called us to do. And it's perhaps the neglected call from the Second Vatican Council, because as you know, Jim, people talk about the council and they focus on the changes in the liturgy and the ecumenical aspects of the council, but nobody's talking about what the council had to say to the laity. We believe that the council gave us our marching orders to renew the temporal order, to transform society from within. And that's our invitation.
And that's our vocation. You know, it's so ironic. I'm going to say that we won't say ironic. We're all Catholic Christians here. It was God's plan that you reached out to me, Christopher, and we engaged in this conversation because I'm in the diaconate program for my diocese. And this past semester was all about Vatican II. We studied all of the documents of Vatican II, Gaudium Est, and all of them. And it was really an education on the role of the laity, our call as laity to be engaged. It's why, all of my brother candidates and I, were accepted into the diaconate program, because we sensed that call at some point in our life. But this isn't about us. The question I think I want to ask you and Aaron is, what do you think is it that prevents the laity from assuming that role of leadership in the church? Is it a lack of desire? Is it a lack of education? Is it just not the way? Is it not a part of our culture in the church? What do you think is it? What is holding the laity back from assuming their rightful called leadership in this ministry, in this church?
Yeah, that is a really good question. We haven't been asked that one, I don't think. So
good.
Yeah, it's that's exactly what we're trying to get to the bottom of, really, in this book and in our mission through this book. So I think there's a few ways to answer that question. I think not well formed or not well educated in the fact that the church calls us to be leaders. Also, probably laziness, I would say, because a lot of laity do really believe that it's only the priests and bishops' jobs to do the leading in our church. And I think that's part of what we were talking about with the scandals. When all these people left the church, I think that really showed where they think the leadership lies, that it's all on our priests and deacons and bishops and cardinals and the Pope. It's not on us at all. So God forbid, one of them messes up and it is now public information. Well, that's on them. And I don't want to be a part of that kind of a group. So that's the way a lot of people see it, that all the leadership in the church is not on the laity. So I think it's a combination of that laziness, as well as just lack of education and lack of good formation in the Catholic Church's teaching. So, and it's on us. That's partly why this book is so important. It's on us, the laity, those of us who understand that call, that we are and can be leaders, to educate our fellow brothers and sisters in the Catholic Church, that they too can do this. So I think it's a lot of different things, but there's also a lot of beliefs that women don't have leadership roles in the church and they should, or why is it only certain people can be priests and deacons and work for the church and all these things. But really, being a lay person is actually such a beautiful opportunity, because there's so much in front of us that we can be a leader in. Christopher and I continuously share this, that we as the laity can reach the corners of society that priests and bishops and deacons frankly just can't. So it's really our job as the laity to find those spaces where we thrive, where we're working, our families, our communities, the organizations that we're a part of, to be those Catholic voices in those spaces, because we have a unique opportunity that we can reach those people and other people can't. So we can all be leaders, and a leader doesn't have to be someone in the spotlight either. That's what I've been sharing a lot as we promote this book too. A stay-at-home mom, a stay-at-home dad, someone who doesn't have this CEO role or managerial role, they can be leaders too. Leadership of the family is so important and such a big part of this same message. So really, leadership can look a lot of different ways in a lot of different people's situations, but we can all truly be leaders.
I couldn't agree more. It was interesting. My professor over the past semester, he asked us the question: is it and this is just an example of leadership and the laity taking a role. Is it the church's fault that Roe v. Wade has been what it has been over the last decades and abortion has been legal? Do we blame the clergy, or is it really the role of the laity? Whose responsibility is it to overturn Roe v. Wade or other Catholic issues? The clergy only has so much reach. He made the argument, and rightly so, that it's the laity in the marketplace, the laity who are really called to be more involved in politics than the clergy are, and to overturn laws that are unjust or un-Catholic, or that go against the teachings of the church. And so, it might be an example. And of course, now there's lots of discussion around, how that may be overturned. But just at what point does the laity say, well, these things are unjust, they go against our teaching. Hey, you, Father, why aren't you doing something about that? Well, we as the laity have to step forward and take that role.
It's very interesting what you're pointing out, Jim, if I may, because it shows us what a basic misunderstanding we have.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Of the role of the laity and the role of the clergy. Right. The clergy is there to uphold and teach, right? They're the ones that really are safeguarding and passing on the magisterium of the church,
right,
and make the sacraments available to us.
Mm-hmm.
So through the magisterium, the clergy, the popes, the bishops, or priests, they are teaching us, or are supposed to be teaching us, a set of Catholic principles, so that then the laity, in its role to enact and make come alive these principles in society, can think of the correct and specific policies according to each specific community, guided by the principles that the church teaches, right? So it's just a complete misunderstanding. It's not up to the priests or the bishops to bring about the laws that any particular community needs. It's up to them to properly guide the conscience and form the laity so that the laity can engage the public square. And this is why, you know, the name of this book, I think it says it all. It's Catholic leadership, but not for the parish. We already have a lot of leadership there. Thank God. It's Catholic leadership for civil society that the world needs more right now.
I totally agree. And so, you know, in chapter 2, and I promise we're not going to go chapter by chapter, although we could be here all afternoon. It'd be a very long podcast. But you talk a little bit about, you define leadership, and how would you kind of, for our listeners, how would you define? I think Aaron, you said it quite eloquently. How do you define leadership in the 21st century for the Catholic laity?
Yeah, well, in our book, we specifically share that we subscribe to the virtuous leadership's definition of leadership. So a leader is someone who brings about the greatness in others, or accomplishes great things by bringing about the greatness in others. And I think that can really be applied to every kind of person that we're talking about and talking to in our book. And, you know, leadership has almost become a field in and of itself. It's like there's leadership conferences and leadership summits and leadership classes, courses, certifications, and everyone's trying to redefine or think of some new way to talk about or teach or define leadership, when really it's not that complicated. It's very simple. And that's why we like this definition. And that's why we talk about leadership from this perspective throughout our book, because really that's what a leader is. It's accomplishing great things by bringing about the greatness in others. And that's it. And it doesn't need to be this I mean, of course, there's a lot of ways to do that, but that's what we're called to do, is to discern, okay, what skills and talents and characteristics and virtues can I bring to my own role as a leader, and how can I go out and then be that leader for others? I think it's a very modern way to approach leadership. I think it's a very timeless definition. I think it's going to be something that's how just who a leader is. You know, what a leader has been, what a leader is now, what a leader will be in the future. So I think it's a very timeless definition, and I'm grateful that that's kind of the way that we just lay the foundation for leadership in our book, because I think it's a very easy and basic way to go back to.
Absolutely. And, you know, also, you also talk a little bit about, you know, have we missed the boat and in this century so far? And do you think that some Catholics, we talked about some of the reasons why maybe people don't understand their role in the church, the laity, I mean, do you think, are they waiting for somebody? Are they waiting for somebody else to take that leadership role? I think it's interesting. I've worked a lot with volunteers in my career, and it's very difficult sometimes to get somebody to move from being a member of a committee to taking the leadership in a committee, right? And actually stepping forward to that leadership, because a lot of folks are either they're concerned about the amount of time that is involved, or maybe they don't see those leadership qualities within themselves, but we see that. And of course, we're trying to draw that out of them. What do you think? What are people waiting for? Because I think part of this journey for people to take leadership is to maybe recognize within themselves, what has held me back from taking a leadership role in the church? Am I not educated? Is it not been in my culture? Do I not understand my role? But what do you think we're waiting for?
So there's definitely not a culture of inviting lay Catholics in the church to consider themselves, to see themselves as leaders. There's not enough of a culture. Right. But this is precisely the work that we're doing, right, Jim? So we're trying to invite lay Catholics around the world to reconsider that by virtue of their baptism, they're all called to be leaders. Jim, it used to be that people would lead in their communities just because they were Catholics. I mean, if we can think of, and I was recently speaking with some friends in Europe, and they concurred with me in places like Poland or Ireland or Spain, right? All of the great leaders were Catholics.
Yes.
It was really our faith that compelled us to lead. And here in the United States too, if you think about the beautiful and great history of Catholic migration into the United States, right? All of those large cities in the East Coast that were populated by Italians and Poles and Germans. And then these immigrants were creating the most essential institutions in their community, colleges and universities and hospitals and schools. And whenever someone saw a need, they would build something and fill the gap, and they would lead. So we used to know and understand much better than we do today that because we're Catholic, we should lead. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, it just makes sense. Mm-hmm. The church is the custodian of God's revelation for humanity. We have the church. It's our job to go around the world and bring light to all those places of darkness.
Agreed. How does that translate among the generations? Because I know that as I see my parents' generation, the boomers, and I'm a Gen Xer, and we hear a lot about the millennials now and young families and such. How does leadership translate among the generations and our baptismal call? Are you seeing a lot of younger leaders come on board? Are they those in the midlife? Are you seeing folks more in the boomer age group, or what are you seeing out there in the field?
Well, I think, and I'm just going to speak from my personal perspective. If you have a different perspective, Christopher, I'd love for you to share. But the way that I see leadership in the church happening is that boomer generation those are the people who are working within the parishes. Mm-hmm. At least from my perspective, again, that's the caveat of this whole answer.
Sure.
I just see a lot of that generation working at the church and the parish offices and the ministries there, which is great. So good, very needed. Like we say, we need people working within the church walls. So I see a lot of that kind of leadership. And then for the generation beneath them, and probably even into millennials, I really do see a desire to lead in other ways. I think like my parents' generation, I'm not sure that I think they're figuring it out. I think they see their children, who are mostly millennials, wanting and desiring and having a lot of different kinds of leadership roles, whether or not that's faith-based or not is neither here nor there. But I think, my parents' generation is starting to understand, like, oh, I can be a leader in my sort of spheres of influence. And at least, one example is, my mom is very passionate about the pro-life movement, and she's just recently started to understand, like, she used to be the director of a nonprofit who served women in crisis pregnancy. So now she's trying to take those passion and those skills to work within the Culture of Life committee at our parish. So, they're starting to understand, like, oh, my skills are transferable. Even if I'm not doing something that I used to be doing, I can still do it in a leadership way now. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like for my generation, the millennials, I think it's a little bit all over the board, but there's a definite desire to lead, whether or not that's executed upon morally or ethically or in the right way is maybe it's questionable. But I think especially the Catholic millennials, I think there's a really big desire to have leadership roles. And I think I'm very proud of my generation for just starting to understand, like, we're the next generation of leaders, we're the next generation of parents, we're the next generation of teachers, everything, every job. And I think that's why Christopher's in my book really speaks to young professionals, because this is opening a door for them that like, and telling them, empowering them, you can do this, you can lead. It's just about where you want to do that. So, and then, the generations below us, I think we really have to work hard to share this message with them as they start getting through, high school and into their college years, and thinking about their own futures and what they want, because there's a lot going on, especially in the education sector, and a lot of things happening politically that's really affecting these younger generations. And we really, as Catholics, we need to work hard to be in those spaces, to be speaking to the generations below mine. So I know that was a very long answer, but I think it really is different for each generation.
It really is. Couldn't agree more. My kids fall in the college age generation right now, and there's so many noises competing for their, people competing for their attention, whether it's on social media or the friends that they meet at their college, or just the circles that they travel. So I couldn't agree more. One of the great things about your book is that it offers so many. It offers an education in what the resources are out there, so that people can look up the church documents and find what does the church teach about the role of the laity in Vatican II. And I agree with what you said, Christopher. I think so many people really focus in on the changes of the liturgy, the moving away from the Latin Rite, Latin Mass, and they forget that this is what the church fathers were really focused in on, is engaging the laity. It's the generation that I grew up in the 80s, the post Vatican II, and it's why I got involved at a young age. But was it one of the things that I noticed is that you could almost do a deep dive on some aspect of social teaching, as you're saying, Aaron, and decide, oh, okay, healthcare, that is something that I work in every day. Maybe there's where I can plug in and share my gifts. Or marketing, I'm good at getting the word out. Maybe there's where I can share my gifts. But is that kind of how you were thinking about when you offered this kind of potpourri, or this outline of resources, as it were, so that people could educate themselves on the role of the laity?
So what we were thinking of, Jim, was to show Catholic professionals, again, that's the audience, that if God has blessed them with a professional career, they have received this training, a college education in most cases. Yeah. There's a reason for it. He has given us these gifts, these talents, these skills. That should be looked as our primary field of mission. So absolutely, if you're in marketing, how can you put those gifts to the service of the church? If you are in healthcare, in education, an engineer, law, whatever your field might be, not only in the way in which you serve the church directly, right? I mean, every parish has a diocesan consul and a finance consul, and our pastors need that type of support, right? But we're not just talking about ministry and work within the church. We're talking about looking for concrete ways to influence society outside of the church.
Yes.
Every career path, or most of them, has some type of professional association or guild that most people can belong to. And each of us, you are, as a development officer, right? I know there are national development organizations and conferences, and there are leadership paths and opportunities there too, right? I was just speaking with another group by Zoom as well, and I had some interesting questions from a dentist and from somebody who was involved in development, in leadership development work. And they were asking, well, how can I be a leader in my space? And I was telling them, listen, each of you are probably part of a guild, or should be part of a guild or a professional association, and get involved in leadership. Each of those organizations probably has a national conference. And when you are in the leadership, you get to decide what type of training and presentations and conferences and what type of content is going to be disseminated in the conference. You also get to decide who the sponsors of your conference will be. So if you are a person in leadership in a National Dentist Association, you get to decide if you will allow, or you will at least have one vote to decide whether you will allow Planned Parenthood to be this year's conference sponsor or not, right? So each of us can take on those spaces where we can be of influence, positive influence in society. Ultimately, Jim, we say that what we want, what we're trying to accomplish is to have more faithful and committed Catholic voices at all of those tables where decisions are made. That's why there is a whole chapter in the book focused on board service. Because as we tell the readers and the participants of the program, board service is where leadership happens.
Mhm. Excellent, excellent. So what is next for your organization? Where do you see? I know right now you're publicizing the book, and it seems to be getting some great traction. Are you enrolling for the next cohort, or where are you at in the process here in 2022?
The beauty of it, Jim, is that the book is so intertwined with the organization that when we're promoting the message of the book, we're promoting the message of the organization.
Sure.
But the organization is now about to graduate this year's cohort. So we only ran one track of the program, one cohort in the spring. And now we start all over throughout the summer. We work on awareness and just letting people know about the program. We'll be taking applications for the next generation of Tepeyac leaders in October and November. That's open enrollment where people can apply for admission. And then the program runs again in 2023 from February to June.
Excellent, excellent. Well, this has just been terrific having you both on the podcast. I'm going to provide a link in the show notes, both to the to Tepeyac, but also to where folks can purchase the book, as well as to Christopher and Aaron. But before we go, Aaron, why don't you tell folks where to find you?
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I can be found mostly, I use LinkedIn and Instagram. So on Instagram, my handle is @flowering.at.his.feet. And then my LinkedIn is just linkedin.com/Aaron-Monin, MONNIN. So can find me there. I'd love to continue the conversation and connect with people that way. So thank you.
No, thanks, Aaron. How about you, Christopher? Where can folks find you?
Sure. I'm very Googleable, very Googleable. So Christopher Pereira, very active on LinkedIn and other social media, but I would say that's my social media of choice, LinkedIn for sure.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you both for all you're doing in service to the church, for the hearts and minds that you're changing and the way that you're transforming our society into leaders of all generations. It's so needed, and so grateful to you both being on the show today.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks so much, Jim.
God bless.